Best of luck.
Break a leg. Oh, no, don't do that. Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 31st of July. And joining me on this edition, our assistant editor, Steve Withers.
I am a meat popsicle.
And special guest, Mark Botwright.
But who cares?
Right, so we'd planned all the podcast out. We had a running order and everything. We record this on a Friday morning, as you know, and on Thursday evening. I think Ed was leaving his own house and he says the step moved and he's gone and broken his leg and he's still in hospital now. So, you know, I've heard some excuses to get out of recording a podcast, but Ed really has taken it to extremes on this occasion.
Yes. Breaking your leg in two places above the knee is not necessarily. He could just said he didn't want to do it. But I'm wondering whether his the step giving way beneath his foot has anything to do with either his weight or alcohol consumption. He wants to bet there may have been a beer or two involved.
Yeah, steps just don't really move, do they? Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Ed's a big bloke, though, isn't he?
I'm sure he's really going to appreciate you saying that.
Get well soon.
Height as well as
Yeah, in all seriousness, I hope he does get better soon, because leg breaks, they can be really quite nasty, and it can take months to get full mobility again, so hopefully it's not too serious.
Very unfortunate timing for Ed, wasn't it, since he's about to go on holiday today.
I don't think Ed will be going on holiday as he's sat in hospital. And the thing is, letting the side down is he's lying in a bed in hospital. They've got an internet connection. He could quite easily have recorded a podcast.
Yeah, it couldn't sound any worse than it normally does for him.
On the plus side, though, he won't be able to make any excuses for not making the next month's podcast, though, will he?
No, because he's not going out. He's not going out.
I just hope they prescribe him with some really, really heavy-duty opiates so that we can have Ed on the podcast whilst tripping. I think that would be good.
Do you not think it's bad enough when he's here normally?
Well, we both know how much more fun Ed is once he's had a few drinks in him. So.
That is true. He's a completely different person.
These headphones might be reference quality, or it might be the morphine.
In fact, you're not even wearing any headphones, Ed.
So we did have a thing down to talk about electric cars, because obviously the government have announced that from 2040 they won't be selling petrol and diesel cars, and Ed would have been the perfect person to discuss this with, but unfortunately he's not here.
Maybe the shock of it is what caused him to fall.
The shock of what? That he's not going to be able to buy a petrol car?
Yeah, he picks up the morning newspaper, sees it and falls.
I think it's important anti-pollution legislation, along with restricting people from flying too much as well, because whilst we're recording this, the other member of the podcast who's not present is currently getting on a plane on his holidays. So I do think they should look at not people who go on holiday once a year, but people who fly a lot should possibly be penalised more than those who go on a plane once a year, like us. Well, twice a year in my case. Yeah. Actually, I get on a plane quite a lot, don't I? I think about it.
I was thinking about that, Stephen. I'm just thinking, you're digging yourself your own hole there. No, I mean, don't get me wrong. I totally agree. Air pollution is a really bad thing, especially in big built-up areas like London and other big cities like Birmingham and so on. Especially when you've got so many buses on the road that run on diesel. And if they're anything like the buses that go past my house on a regular basis, they're not only 90 dB in noise as they go past and make the windows shake, but the amount of gunk that they spew out is unbelievable, because these things run for decades on the road, these buses, and they're a huge pollutant, especially in London when you've got so many of them. And then black taxis as well, all running on diesel engines. I mean, really, it's diesel engines. Why
don't they target buses and taxis first, and get them to clean up and use electric or hybrid or LPG or whatever it is? I mean, in Hong Kong, all the taxis were LPG. Why don't they take that approach as a starting point, and then obviously later on get everyone else to transfer across?
Exactly. I mean, if the priority now is to cut pollution now, doing it in 2040 is not going to help now. And like you say, the big polluters are the taxis and the buses. And with a little bit of government funding, they could move over to electric and so on. If electric is going to be the big winner, then get the buses and taxis running on them first. There are some cities where you can only use a hybrid or a full electric car, around the world. So why is the UK not taking a big step and really pushing and becoming a leader in this, Mark?
Why? Well, speaking as someone who doesn't drive, it just seems to me like it's the easy thing to say, why don't we do more? The question is, as ever, the infrastructure around it. It's quite easy to say ban a certain type of vehicle. However, if you're moving towards electric, what happens with regards to charging points for people who live in flats?
Yeah.
What happens with charging points for people in the rural communities? Saying the UK will do something is, it's a target that looks achievable when you consider maybe a small town or something like that, or a progressive city like London, which has got huge money to throw on kind of new rail links and stuff like that, so they can work to that goal. However, like someone living in the Outer Hebrides, someone living in rural Wales, there are so many problems with it thus far that it just seems a little bit like kind of Trump's view of Obamacare. Repealing something or banning something or abolishing something is the easy step. Working out exactly how you can replace something in a way that doesn't cause huge upheaval, that's the harder part of it. And I think this is just going to be one of those kind of hot potatoes that everyone secretly hopes they're not actually in government come 2040.
Yeah, I mean, there is a bit of that, isn't it? It's so far away, 20 odd years away. It's so far that they can say whatever they like at this moment in time.
We'll have hover cars by then.
Yeah, flying cars by then, sure, at that
time. But yeah, I mean, you make some really pertinent points there, Mark. And rather than trying to change everybody over, I think my point and Steve's point was change public transport to start with. And the government pushed a lot of people into diesel cars because 10, 15 years ago that was the thing. They thought they were less pollutant, so get everybody into diesels, whereas diesels is the number one killer when it comes to air pollution. So petrol is bad, but it's not nearly as bad as diesel. So the problem the government has is that they can't then ban diesel cars if they've told everybody to go and buy them, without introducing some kind of scrappage scheme where the government pay you to get rid of your diesel, but where's that money going to come from? And like you say, the infrastructure, Mark, if you're getting people out of diesel, then you're halfway there. You change public transport and add them together, then that's a big chunk. And you've got 20 years for electric cars to develop. And let's face it, I mean, we're all interested in tech, and that's what gets us excited. I have to say, electric cars don't get me excited at this moment in time. Because there's so many downsides to the technology at the minute, and what it's going to take is a big push, not just from governments and everything, but from technology companies and from vehicle manufacturers. And we get vehicle manufacturers saying, yeah, we're going to release electric cars and we're going to do this and do that, but we haven't actually seen it yet. There's very few models out there.
They're quite expensive as well, aren't they?
Oh, really expensive. when compared to internal combustion engine cars, they are more expensive, and the tech inside them at the minute is no more tech than what you get in a normal car. Avoidance detection, adaptive cruise, lane assist, and all that kind of thing. You can get all that in a car now, so there's nothing really that appealing other than what Tesla are doing. But then you're going to have to drop 70 grand for a Tesla, and that's a lot of money. There are other cars around, electric cars, and obviously our boss, Stuart, is going to become an owner of an electric car, and it'll be interesting to see what his experiences are. And like you said, Mark, people who live on the street, like I do, park on the street or live in a flat and that kind of thing, at the minute, the infrastructure is just not there to do it. Whereas Stuart's got a driveway and so on. He's had the pod installed to charge it up and so on. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on with it, and how he gets on with the tech. And there's others on the forum. I think Gordon Fraser as well. Hello, Gordon. He's got the same car as what Stuart's waiting on, and he's been posting his experiences. So if that's the kind of thing that interests you, there is a forum on the forums for electric cars and autonomous vehicles. I mean, autonomous vehicles, we're getting on another subject there, which is pie in the sky, if you ask me. But we need to move things on in this podcast. But if you're interested in electric cars, I'm sure we'll come back to this subject over the many years that are yet to come, if we're still doing the podcast.
23 years at least, by the looks of it.
I'm going to be disappointed if I'm still sitting here on a Friday morning in 23 years' time.
I'll be 73 at that point, so maybe not.
And we'll all still be saying the same thing. Where's my hoverboard?
Yeah, and we'll all be excited for the next Star Wars movie. Right, so moving on from electric cars, let's go to Mark for the current competitions.
Okay, we can win American Gods Season 1 on Blu-ray, and that one runs till the 4th of August, so you've got to be quick with that. You can also win a Scan Cydia S1 Nero Luxury Gaming Chair. That one runs till the 30th of August, and also running to the 30th of August, you can win a Xerotech Dobby Mini Selfie Quadcopter, courtesy of GearBest.
It's the name Dobby that cracks me up every time.
Yeah.
What a strange name to call your quadcopter. And is it not a drone?
It looks like a drone, but for some reason they don't seem to be referring to it as a drone. It's a quadcopter, but what's the difference between a quadcopter and a drone?
I don't know. That's
what's the definition of a drone, actually? That's a good question.
One will soon be banned, probably.
I think you're right there, Mark. And any previous winners?
Yep, Wild Card won London Heist on DVD.
Hope you enjoy your retro prize there, Wild Card. Well done to you. Right, moving on, hardware news, and we're going to go to some sound bars because it's still a huge area of the market, Stephen, and one that's growing as the months go on, really, because there is a tendency at this moment in time, whether we like it or not, to go for convenience and to go for that minimalist look in the living room these days, and using a soundbar is usually the easier way of getting around the partner's objections to speakers all over the room.
Yeah, I mean, we say convenience, but actually, I've got to say that I think soundbars have been getting better and better, and I've actually heard some really good ones in the last couple of years, and particularly this year. And also, they're adding a lot more features now. So whilst traditionally in the past a soundbar would have been, basically a stereo soundbar at the front, maybe a bit of side action with sideward firing drivers, or I guess pioneered by Yamaha, they had their sort of, focusing sound beams around the room to create a more immersive effect. But generally, they were kind of stereo soundbars at the front of the room, go underneath your TV, improve the sound quality a bit. But these days, you can get an awful lot. As I say, pioneered initially by Yamaha, but now all the manufacturers are doing this kind of thing, and they've been adding immersive audio. So I've seen a number of soundbars now that support Dolby Atmos, and to varying degrees of success, I have to say. But it means, that even if you are looking at a soundbar, you don't necessarily have to compromise as much as you might expect, and you can get quite an immersive experience from something that doesn't require a lot of installation or a lot of, cables and speakers around the room, that kind of thing. So that's good news. And the most recent one that I've seen has been the Sony HT-ST5000, which again is a Dolby Atmos supporting soundbar. It claims to do 7.1.2, which means 7 channels at ear level, 2 overhead channels, and also a subwoofer. In actuality, it's a single point, it's a single point source. So it's just the soundbar plus a wireless sub. So there aren't any actual rear speakers. So the 7 channel bits, not quite true. I mean, basically you've got 3 very distinct front channels. You have a sort of sense of a bit more width to it. And then you have 2 upward firing drivers that do actually work very well and create an overhead sense of, you get a sound coming from overhead, although it is again more towards the front of the room because of where the actual upward firing drivers actually are. But yes, I mean it works. It does definitely work. It does create a more immersive sense of surround envelopment. It creates an overhead experience as you would expect from Atmos. And I thought it was very impressive. It also, more importantly, I think perhaps it sounded very good, even when you were using it for things like music, just as in a 2-channel configuration. I thought it sounded really good. So there's been a definite trend towards better sounding soundbars, I think, even though they've become relatively small compared to some older models, but also more features. So things like immersive audio. Also, it's got 3 HDMI inputs and an HDMI output, and it supports ALC and it supports 4K and HDR. So you're getting an option now where a soundbar can be a viable alternative to an AVR. Now, I should stress, of course, as I perhaps mentioned, you're not getting the full surround experience. This has been the case with Sony. Also, the K850 from Samsung, which again didn't have any actual rear speakers, and also the SJ9 from LG, again didn't have any rear speakers. So it's very much a front-heavy experience. There's a degree of envelopment, but it's not the same as having actual speakers behind you. So if you want that, you're looking at the Samsung K950, which actually has wireless rear speakers with upward firing drivers to create a genuine 5.1.4 experience. However, having said that, I think the Sony was impressive, very well made, as you would expect from Sony. It's a beautifully designed piece of equipment. It sounds great, and it does deliver an overhead and relatively immersive experience. So, Yeah, impressive.
No, I was just going to ask about the upward firing drivers. So is that going to be bouncing off the ceiling? Is that
absolutely? Yeah, that's right. I mean, so the majority of sorry, come on.
No, I was just going to say, because I've got a sloped ceiling, so is that going to make a difference? Because I remember when like Yamaha's sound projecting sound bars, that kind of thing, came out. It was all about the room itself as much as anything. If you had curtains, if you had blinds, that kind of thing, as to how much the sound would actually resonate. And so I didn't know whether that would make a difference for the upward firing drivers.
Yeah, well, absolutely. It's a good point, Mark. It's worth mentioning that for the best effect, you do need a flat reflective ceiling, not too high up as well. If you've got some big high vaulted ceiling, this is not going to work. My ceiling is quite low. It's flat and reflective, so it works perfectly for overhead these overhead sounds. And I've got some test discs, with things like a helicopter flying around above your head, and it's distinctly coming from above you. So it definitely does work. But you're right, Mark. If you've got a curved or a vaulted or a sloped ceiling or some sort of anything that's going to absorb the sound above you, then that's going to affect the performance of these kind of approach. And all these sound bars use that approach, that they use upward firing drivers to create that sense of overhead sound by bouncing it off the ceiling. So that is a very, very valid point.
I've got to say, Steve, that the last couple of soundbars I've had in, I've got a Samsung in at the moment. I mean, not immersive soundbars, but just normal soundbars. And I've got to say, I've been really impressed with just how big a step up they are compared to the TV speakers. And I'm not going to slag off the TV I've got here, which I use for testing, which was a high-end TV last year from Samsung, which is the KS9500. And it has decent speakers in the bottom because there's enough room in there, and you get a decent enough sound from the TV. But even so, the step up to a soundbar nowadays, like I say, I've got a Samsung in here, and obviously I had the Q Acoustics recently as well. And I've got to say, you'd expect it from Q Acoustics because they are a hi-fi brand. You would expect it to sound really quite good and quite beefy, even though it doesn't have a subwoofer. Same here, this Samsung soundbar that I'm doing at the minute, which is the M650. It actually does a really good job of conveying, a decent sound stage in front of the TV, as long as you're sitting bang on in the middle or within a 30-degree arc of the TV, which you will anyway if you've got an LED LCD TV. You get a decent enough soundstage there, but the audio quality is just such a step up, and really impressed with the quality that you can get nowadays. I mean, it will never replace an AVR and 5 or 7 speakers and a couple of subwoofers and so on, but in most lounges that's just not going to happen these days. And these solutions really are up in the game now, and they are, like I say, they'll never compete with a proper speaker system, but the quality is there. And if you want to just improve the sound quality coming from your flat panel TV, there's so many options now. And like I say, if you want to go the full immersive hog, you're not going to get anything from behind you, but you're going to have a nice big open soundstage, which is better than just the speakers from the TV.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, there is a degree of compromise to this approach, but it's less of a compromise, I think, than it used to be. And an area that really surprises me, and you've touched on it, Phil, is I wouldn't traditionally in the past have considered a soundbar as a way of listening to music. But with the addition of things like multi-room systems now, so these soundbars, say the one from Samsung, the one from LG, I mean, they are part of a multi-room system as well. And the Sony supports high-res audio. And these soundbars, they actually can sound very good with music too. They can genuinely play music, and it can be, as you say, as long as you're sat in the right spot. It can be a genuinely good source for music listening, as in maybe you're streaming it around the house and you want to go into the lounge and listen to a bit of music while you're there, doing something else. It can genuinely work that way. So they are a compromise to a degree, but they do offer a lot of functionality and features, and also, as you say, without the mess and the inconvenience of having to put additional speakers around the room. I think they're becoming a very valid alternative to an AVR, although my personal preference would be for an AVR. And even if I can't necessarily do, like in the lounge, I don't do a full 5.1 system normally. I just have stereo speakers, but I think it is a viable alternative these days. And obviously, as you say, it is something that keeps partners and other halves happy too, when you haven't got to start running speaker cable up the sides of the rooms and putting speakers on stands behind the sofa and this sort of stuff. So as long as you accept the limitations of the approach, I think you can be pleasantly surprised.
Is this it now then? Sound bars are going to be, kind of ubiquitous, multifunctional tech items in every living room, so we just accept that TV sound is never going to come back to what it was.
Yeah, I think that's the way the market's moving. You've even, once you get companies like Sky TV releasing their own soundbars, then you know that it's mainstream and the push is there to improve TV sound. And that was announced just this week that Sky are going to do their own branded soundbars.
So I wonder who's making the soundbars for Sky, Phil?
Devialet. I think that's how you say it.
I don't think that's how you pronounce it.
No? How do you think it's pronounced then, Mark?
Devialet.
Yeah, Devialet.
Devialet. It's not Bucket, it's Bouquet.
I'm not familiar with that brand. Who are they?
Pass. I don't know. Seemingly they do a few soundbars because there are forum members I've seen discussing the fact that they own some models from that company. I have to say they have passed me by. Maybe it's something we need to look into.
Yes. Interesting. Like you say, I think it has reached mainstream. Definitely they've become mainstream. And I'd say probably the de facto option when it comes to improving sound quality on TV. I mean, I wonder if one day we'll start to see TVs, but they just don't bother with the speakers anymore. Particularly if they're going for the super thin OLEDs, it is an issue, isn't it? Because
you look at the super. Yeah, but a lot of them have got the sound bars built in already. If you look at the LGs and the Panasonic, and so they've already got the sound bars there. So you're already seeing that move, Steve. And it's always been something that certainly we've complained about since the days of Plasma ended, where you had decent audio systems. I mean, the Pioneer Plasmas, they came without sound, without speakers built into them. You had to buy either the bar that went along the bottom, or you could buy speakers that went on the side and connected, and they did sound really good because they were properly designed speakers. And Sony's, they used to have the big, although you didn't like them, they used to have the big speakers either side of the TVs as well.
Well, they sounded great, but the TVs were massive. Weighed a ton.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, Steve, people only install their TV once. I mean,
yeah, I know.
You take it from the point of view you got set up and put it away again. That a lot of people don't. Well, there's some forum members that probably go through as many TVs as you do, but the general public in general, they only set their TVs up once, so not really an issue if it's heavy. Right, let's move things on. End of the month, Mark. What's your game of the month?
My game of the month is Pyre on the PlayStation 4. It's from Supergiant Games, the studio behind Bastion and Transistor. It's a kind of small. It's only I think $15.99 on the PlayStation Network. It's a kind of text fantasy adventure type game, but it's mixed in with sports, which seems like a very odd combination. That you have to try and get your characters through the journey by winning these little kind of 3-on-3 sports matches, which it's their own invention, kind of basketball like. And it seems an odd mix. However, when you think about it, when you think about the way in which most fantasy games can use things like tactical role-play game elements and things like that, moving characters within a certain arena, interacting with opponents using powers, that kind of thing, then it makes sense. There's a tactical element to the sports side of things, and they've got the language right. It's kind of reminiscent to me of the kind of old choose your adventure books that I used to read as a kid, that kind of thing. Good use of like flowery fantasy prose. You do have to pop your glasses on though, because I found the text a little bit small, but that might just be me. Very, very much kind of painterly aesthetic, very much in the kind of 2D graphic novel look, very bright. And I just found it a very interesting idea. The sports element. You have to move one player at a time, and you can only pass the ball, and then they can move, and so it feels a little bit like kind of Subbuteo, or back to kind of playing something like NBA Jam or something like that on the SNES. But it's his own creation, and it kind of ties it into the lore of what they've created as well. So it's very interesting as a mix. So I think well worth it. That's Pyre. You might be surprised Splatoon 2 came out this month on the Nintendo Switch, but I haven't picked that up yet because I'm not fully sure whether I'm going to bother with multiplayer gaming on the Nintendo Switch yet.
Right, okay, well, at this point we were going to talk about the Oppo Dark from Ed, and Ed was going to give us his album and vinyl releases and so on, but unfortunately he's not around, so we're going to have to move things on from there. And I guess, Steve, the thing that we can look at is what bit of tech you've reviewed recently that's impressed you enough to go and buy it. And I believe Mark's gone and bought the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the sort of the annual question, isn't it, that we get asked, which TV should I buy, or what TV should I get, or should I buy a TV this year? And every year, the answer is usually, well, if you have to buy a TV, obviously get one. If you don't necessarily need to buy a TV, maybe you want to wait a little bit, because there was, over the last few years, been so much going on in terms of TV technology, so many changes, things like HDR, wider color spaces, OLED's been developing. You've had manufacturers pushing the brightness of LCDs to, nearly 2,000 nits. So lots going on. Standards are in flux. So it's not, not maybe the ideal time. There are other things on the horizon, HDMI 2.1, higher frame rates, all sorts of things. But I do feel we've reached a point now where the technology is matured enough that you can buy a TV with a relative degree of safety and know it's going to be good for the next 4 or 5 years, with the possible protection of high frame rate, which might take a few years to come along anyway. And yes, so I know I've been using the Kuro, which is still, even now, still a lovely picture for high def, but is getting very long in the tooth and looks so old fashioned. And yes, I picked up a 55-inch B7, LG B7 OLED. As I know from testing everything but the C7 now, the picture quality is the same on every single model, and the difference is largely cosmetic, things like, as you mentioned, Phil, soundbars, that sort of stuff. And I love it. I'm very impressed with that. I mean, I knew what to expect because I'd already reviewed it, but I just love having a modern TV in situ for a long period of time rather than the Kuro. It makes you really appreciate a lot of the things you could do that you just couldn't do with an older TV. I love WebOS. The picture quality is fantastic. I've got Now TV and Amazon and Netflix and all the catch-up services there to easily access whenever I want to, all through a single portal. And it's really great, and I'm really pleased with it.
So all you need now is the internet connection to go with it.
Oh, I mean, I get a good picture off. A good picture off of my internet connection into 1080p, just not obviously 4K. Although I do get HDR from Amazon, even if it is only at 1080p. But I'll tell you what's surprising. Even though I haven't got a great internet connection, the compression software these days is so good. The algorithms they use are so good that I moved the Apple TV from the lounge into the home cinema because I don't need it in the lounge anymore because I get everything through the B7. Plugged it in to the JVC, and surprisingly watchable. I mean, really quite impressed at how good Netflix looks, even on a big screen. And even with my crappy internet connection. So,
yeah, I mean, I use the Samsung Blu-ray player, UHD Blu-ray player. I use the apps on there for 4K, Netflix, and so on. Through the JVC X7000, looks really, really good. Really good. I mean, obviously you're going to get banding now and again, you're going to get posterization and stuff, and on the bigger screen you're going to see that within the blacks and stuff now and again where the encoding's not brilliant. But overall the compression and encoding is really pretty decent once it's buffered and up to speed.
Yeah, no, it's. I was really impressed with that. So that was a nice little bonus. Now TV doesn't stand up as well on a projector screen, although it's still watchable. I'm watching Game of Thrones on it, but there was quite a bit of blockiness in the dark parts of the image.
Is it still only 720, or can you get 1080?
Yeah. I think it's 720 still. It doesn't. Right. It looks. It's watchable, but it's nowhere near as good as Netflix. The only thing annoying, but I believe it might be added quite soon, is Amazon isn't currently on the Apple TV. But if they can add Amazon, and I can get all three things in the home cinema as well, then fantastic news. So yeah, B7, very, very pleased. I think it's a fantastic performer, and I've got no complaints whatsoever. Mark?
Well, you know what? I would say the same thing. I've taken delivery of it. However, on the day it got delivered, I also managed to put my back out, so I haven't managed to get it up the stairs yet.
Oh, that must be so infuriating.
Yeah,
having a new bit of tech sitting at the bottom of the stairs, and I feel for you.
Well, it's relatively light though, so I mean, how bad is your back?
No, it's not too bad now. The problem is I left the old TV set up because I'm going to sell that, and I had a bunch of people reply to me on Gumtree, and unsurprisingly for Gumtree, there all seem to be time wasters who never get back to you. So I think I'm
use classifieds then, shouldn't you?
Yeah, actually, I should do. Yeah, very good plug there, Steve. But yeah, I think I'll get it set up over the weekend though, because I'm dying to see it.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. And just to wrap up on, sorry, that sounded so.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. Anyway,
no, you will be. You will be impressed.
Sorry, that just sounded so wrong there. I didn't mean it to sound like that. Moving on. We need to move on. Just to wrap up on hardware, it is the end of the month, so upcoming hardware reviews, like I say, I've got the M650 soundbar in, Steve, and the V9800 review should be up by the time you listen to this podcast. I have been sidetracked a little bit. We have booked up for CES, so we've been doing all the planning and putting our ideas together as to what we're going to do and who's going and so on. So little bits and pieces like that have been sidetracked. Plus, I've been walking a lot. Don't know if
let's hope Ed's better by January.
Yeah, let's hope he's at least mobile.
Mobile, yeah. But
by January, and that he doesn't go and break his. I mean, a good job he got it out of his system in this country and not when we were over there. Could you imagine the medical bill?
We were using Obamacare for Ed. No, it's okay.
Right, so that's what I've got coming up. What have you got coming up, Steve?
Got quite soon. Obviously, there's a Sony soundbar coming up, and then I just reviewed the HEOS AVR, which is Denon's. It's their AVR that's designed specifically for their HEOS multi-room system. It's still an AVR, but it uses. It obviously includes HEOS 5.1 channels built in. You can run it with speakers, but you can also run it. This is interesting, but you can run it with wireless rears using the HS1s if you want, or HS2s. So interesting potential there. It does really work well too. It's a great little receiver. It's been simplified and they've done a lot of things that I think are quite interesting with that. So that's going to be coming up. And I'm finally getting the LG UP970 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. So that'll be the last of the Blu-ray players to review, and then they'll all be done. And then hopefully, fairly soon, I'll be getting the 75-inch XE94 Sony LED LCD TV with direct LED backlight, and the Q9F, Samsung's flagship QLED TV as well in for review.
Yep, should be good. Okay, so that wraps up hardware. We're going to movie news next. So on to movie news, and it is the end of the month, so let's do some totting up when it comes to the Limitless cards. So it's $17.99, minus $17.99 at the start of the month, Steve. So for July, I've only seen 2 films, but I've seen one twice. So Spider-Man Homecoming, and I've seen Dunkirk twice, which comes to $31.50. So I'm in the money. However, I had to pay £5 on top of my limited card to see Dunkirk in IMAX, which we're going to come on to in a minute. So when you take that off, $26.50. So I'm still up for the month.
Yeah, you're still up for the month.
So done quite well there.
I've seen Spider-Man, War for the Planet of the Apes, and Dunkirk. So I'm in the money. It's all good.
Well,
the third month on the...
I might even get War done before the end of the month, because I'm just thinking Monday's still the 31st, isn't it? So I might actually get to see it over the weekend at some point. So I might actually be up even more. Anyway, let's move on to what we're going to talk about, which is Dunkirk. We discussed that a few weeks ago in the podcast, what our favourite war films and World War II films were, and why. And I guess the usual suspects were in there when we were discussing that. There was some pretty good examples given by Ed of stuff that I've certainly never seen when it comes to Russian cinema and that kind of thing. But we're moving into an age now where the possibilities and what we can do in terms of technology and so on, we can get pretty realistic when it comes to these things. And I have to say, I'm going to say it right off the bat, Dunkirk is an absolute masterpiece of filmmaking. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't expecting to be moved by it. I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was. It hits you with a hammer. But you've only seen it once, haven't you, Steve?
Yeah, I have.
It hits you about the head. There's the constant tick of time going on throughout it. Your heart rate's up all the way through, especially on your first viewing, and the sensation of that, and the way that it's not told in a linear fashion either. So it's kind of all over the joint to start with, and then it starts to make a bit more sense. And we're not going to spoil it, so keep listening, because we're not going to go into any spoilers here. But I just have to say that, added with Hans Zimmer's score all the way through, and then this constant heartbeat or ticking of the clock as things get desperate, as the situations move on, and we all know the story of Dunkirk. But the great thing here, and I've seen some criticism of it, saying that the beaches looked empty and it didn't look like how some of the photographs from the time looked and all the rest of it. But the beauty of this film is you're only seeing a tiny, tiny little snapshot of what happens in a tiny little time frame. And Nolan loves to use time in his films, and the sense of time, and the sense of time passing and that kind of thing. And he really plays on it with this film. And it's just relentless all the way through. And I've got to say, the performances are spot on.
Even Harry Styles was quite good.
I didn't, but I'm going to put my hands up. I didn't even know who he was, Harry Styles. I didn't know he was a pop star or anything like that. So to me, it didn't seem unusual at all. And I still don't know who he is.
I'll tell you afterwards who he is.
Oh, right, okay. But yeah, it's an experience, and it's experienced cinema. And like I say, I've seen it twice now. And I would have seen it twice anyway, because I think it's one that you have to see at the cinema. You have to see it at the cinema, and you have to see it at a really good cinema with a decent sound system as well, because the sound design in this film, it is 50% of the experience. Absolutely 50% of the experience. Yeah, like when the
Stukas die.
Oh, I mean, just the noise before the shells hit. Things that you wouldn't consider. The sounds and that kind of thing, and when bombs are dropped and the whistles that they make, and the sound of the Spitfires, and the sound of the rattles within the cockpits. I mean, it's so realistic. You're actually, it's like you are sitting there. And I saw 2 screens. So I saw a digital screen which was presented at 220:1 masked with a decent immersive sound system in there. I'm assuming that it's Atmos. They don't actually tell you what it is. It's like Odeon sound, whatever they call it, but it will be an Atmos system, I would imagine. And then I saw it in IMAX just last night. And obviously IMAX use their proprietary sound system, which is an immersive sound system. I've got to say, hands down, the IMAX sound system, even though I currently have an ear infection, which is slightly blocking one of my ears at the minute, it was unbelievable experience compared to the digital presentation, and the digital presentation was not bad in any way whatsoever. It was actually really, really good. It was just the amount of bass, the amount of, when those bombs dropped, you felt that in your chest. The whole place thudded to the sound of it. The sound design was just astonishingly good. And it's just one of those films, I think. I mean, you might think completely differently, Steve.
Well, what about the aspect ratio changes in the IMAX?
Right, IMAX, yes, it did change. That's one thing I was going to come on to. So, sequences like with Spitfires and that kind of thing, the battle sequences, and there's quite a few of them, but they were full IMAX frame. And then, when you had characters talking and the lighter moments and where things quiet down a little bit, it moved to 220:1. So seeing it in the digital presentation, I don't feel I missed that much in terms of screen real estate compared to the IMAX. But the IMAX is obviously, the experience there is that it completely fills your field of view in an IMAX, well, a proper IMAX screen. So there is that aspect to the presentation, and obviously the sound in the IMAX presentation was another step up on top of what is a really, really good 2D normal screening. It was another step up again in terms, especially bass response, unbelievable. So yeah, I think it's an event movie. I think it's something you have to see on the big screen, which is why I went back and I paid the $5 to see it in IMAX. And I think it's Nolan's best work.
It's up there.
Yes, there's some great films in his lineup, but I actually think, in terms of all the things that he likes to play with, especially the time and the aspect of time and how things and the performances, and the fact that it's a historical event, but it's fictional characters, and fictional. It's a fictional way of telling the story, but it is obviously based on historical fact. And some of the planes and some of the equipment maybe aren't quite right to the trained eye, but to me it just astonishing. You're going to say something completely different now, Steve, aren't you?
Oh no, I'm not. I loved it. I thought I've had my issues with Christopher Nolan in the last couple of films. I thought that both Dark Knight Rises and Interstellar were absolute cobblers. But having said that, I love The Prestige. I love The Dark Knight. I love Memento. I love Inception. So he's made some great films. I think he absolutely knocked it out of the park on this one. I think the narrative structure of it was brilliant. I think the way that it builds and builds and builds, and particularly the way that it dovetails in the last 10, 15 minutes of the film, and everything ties up, was really clever. Sometimes sometimes he thinks he's clever than he actually is, but this time he was genuinely clever in his approach. I think it was a very intelligent and interesting way of depicting Dunkirk from different perspectives, from the aerial perspective, from the sea perspective, and also from the land perspective. I thought the level of reality to it was absolutely staggering. As someone who's a bit of a World War II buff and used to make models of Messerschmitts and Spitfires and Heinkels when I was a kid, they are spot on, absolutely spot on. The aerial battle sequences were brilliant. Tom Hardy delivers so much when all you can see of his eyes in his sequences. The performances were fantastic, as you say. I mean, the largely unknown cast were all great. The better-known people like Mark Rylance was, as always, superb. Kenneth Branagh delivered the goods. It's emotional, although it's not based on real people. Although the people in it aren't necessarily historically accurate. Apparently, the Mark Rylance character is based on Lightoller, the guy that was one of the survivors of the Titanic, who did go over on his boat, saved 55 guys. His son was a pilot who got killed early in the war. And so he knew certain things, and that bit's actually based on a real person, although he isn't named that in the film. But I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. One of the best war films, like World War II war film, than any war film I've ever seen.
It's so emotionally packed, and when I saw it at the weekend, the first time I saw it, it was to a packed cinema, which is quite rare nowadays because there's so many screens and so many screens and so on. To be absolutely every single seat was taken, and a lot of them, I assume, were ex-forces that were there. There was a lot of older people in
I was just going to say that. My screening last night, it was packed, which is unusual again, and the audience skewed heavily. 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds were there, who I never, ever see at the cinema.
Yeah,
normally,
exactly.
When I go to the cinema, it's teenagers and 20-year-olds. This was 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds.
Yeah.
I mean, a very, very unusual experience was going to the cinema with an audience who were respectful, quiet, went on their phones, and a lot of tears.
Yeah, there was a guy in I'm assuming it's his daughter-in-law and his son, sat next to me on the weekend, and he would have been in his 80s, I think, and a veteran. And it was interesting that, I was getting moved by this, but I could see him tensing up. I could see his reaction, and I could see his hand on the armrest as well next to me, and that added a lot to it. Second time around, obviously, it was more interesting to watch I watched more of the structure and how he's put things together, and then you're aware of how time's working, so you're able to put bits and pieces that were confusing the first time around. You're able to match them in a lot better second time around. But it was the Elgar playing at the end mixed in with Zimmer's score, and we're not going to spoil things, but at the end, even second time round, I was choking up at the end. Powerful, moving, absolute masterclass in terms of technical filmmaking and in terms of emotion and performance. Yeah, it's his best work.
Yeah, he was really good. He really knocked it out of the park. I've got one massive complaint, nothing to do with the film or Nolan himself. But once again, the ODM managed to bollocks up my experience because they projected 2.2 to 1 within a 1.85 to 1
never
aspect rate. Totally. So I didn't they weren't using the full width of the screen. And I thought, what the hell? So, once again, I'm sat there thinking, I can't wait to get this on Ultra HD Blu-ray, then I can watch it properly.
Yeah, and I guess for our audience and people listening in who have home cinema systems and all the rest of it, you're going to get that experience at home. Probably not as good as a presentation as a full cinema and that cinema space and IMAX sound and that kind of thing. You're probably not going to get there, but you're going to get the experience. And like I say, 50% of the experience of this film is the sound. And I'm really going to feel sorry for people who see this without a decent sound system, because they're really using some clever tricks within the sound design, especially sub-bass, and basically getting you on edge. And again, we're not going to spoil
ticking
things.
Clock motif was very clever in the way that was used as
clever.
part of the score.
Yeah, because after a few minutes, that becomes subconscious.
Yeah.
And you don't actually hear it, and it does disappear from now and again, but it's constantly there. And sub bass, the way that they used that to make you feel uneasy. There was a lot of that going on as well. A lot of little tricks like that. So I'm going to feel sorry for people who see it without a decent sound system when it comes onto home formats, because you're going to lose that aspect of it if you don't have a decent sound system. And you have to see it on the big screen. If you have not gone to the cinema yet, get yourselves out there to see it, because
my parents actually arrive. They're flying in from Spain tomorrow. So I'm going to take my dad and my mum if she wants to. But I'm going to take him to see it next week, definitely.
Yeah. Mark?
Yeah, all sounds good. I'll be honest. When I first saw the trailer, I was a little bit skeptical. It looked like it was perhaps pushing more towards pulling on the heartstrings a bit more in a melodramatic fashion. So I was a little bit worried which way it would go. But no, I'm hearing exactly the same things you fellas are saying, which is the sound in particular is something that makes you have to go to the cinema to see it for that alone.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if you haven't gone and seen it yet, please do. It is an experience, and like I say, really, really good. And it ultimately wins best film of the month, probably best film of the year so far for me. And there's been some pretty decent films this year, but it's the first one that really sort of wow moment, and who knows, it might even be the film of I was going to say the decade, but maybe that's pushing it a bit.
It sounds like a lot of the sorry, I was just going to say, a lot of the things that I'm hearing applied to this remind me of what people were saying when Saving Private Ryan came out, which is
it's not as visceral as that, obviously.
No,
but it does a good job of making you realise what it must have felt like to be there.
Yeah, it's like the reactions to shells falling, and you know that they're war-weary soldiers, because they hardly flinch. You know, they duck down and that kind of thing, but they hardly flinch at these things, and that's what it'd been like. You know, they are so weary of how things are. You know, they've been at war for such a long time, they've been on the losing side for such a long time. There's just this sense of, you know, despondency and having given up, and that does play through the film.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a good month for films, actually, because I've seen all three films I've seen this month have been crackers. I really, really enjoyed Spider-Man: Homecoming. I thought War for Penny X was excellent, and Dunkirk was superb. So I will pick Dunkirk as my movie of the month. But overall, I think it's been a good month for me.
Yeah, I've got to say, Spider-Man was a lot better than I feared it would be. I did. So enjoy
have we not had a kind of proper summer blockbuster turkey yet?
No, I don't think there has been a
Baywatch
bomb yet. Baywatch didn't do very well, but I don't think it was massively expensive, and no one was expecting much from it anyway.
Well, you were. Chris, you banged on about it for months.
I enjoyed it, actually. I thought it was quite funny. Yes, it's no masterpiece, but it was all right. Valerian has done, which opens next week. We'll come back to that in a minute, but that's bombed in the States.
Well, why
200 million quid?
Why don't we go into that one now? Because I'm hearing a lot of mixed reviews about this one, Valerian, and from some people who I trust their point of view, or certainly I don't trust their point of view, but their point of view is normally the same as mine, are saying it's almost like Fifth Element in terms of they think it's underrated.
Well, it's certainly obviously the same writer director as the Fifth Element, Luc Besson, and it's got that kind of stylized, over-the-top sci-fi look that Fifth Element had, but obviously with modern effects, taking it to a whole other level. I think it looks really interesting in the trailers, but I haven't seen it yet. Obviously, it opens on Wednesday, and I will go and see it next week at some point. And I'm curious because I mean, Luc Besson is never boring. His films may not be great always, but he makes interesting stuff. He does sci-fi well. The effects look pretty impressive. I'm not totally sold on the cast.
Did Fifth Element bomb? I've got a funny feeling it did as well.
It did okay. But it was very expensive. I mean, apparently the budget for Valerian is $200 million. So, but they have pre-sold a lot of this in different territories. So apparently, although it hasn't done very well in the States, it's expected to do a lot better in France, for example, and in Europe, maybe in Asia. And they've already pre-sold various region territories, so that they should be okay in terms of not going to lose a ton of money on it. But it might be the first film not do very well box office wise. But I mean, I'm still looking forward to it, even though it's
I'll be there.
Didn't open well in America last week. So
yeah, I'll go and see it. I love sci-fi anyway, so I'm more prepared to put up with sci-fi than everything else. Right, so let's move on to what's coming up on Blu-ray this week, Steve.
This week we have The Boss Baby, animated film about a baby who's basically voiced by Alec Baldwin. Also available on Ultra HD Blu-ray if you're interested. We've got Power Rangers, which I've seen, and most of my surprise was actually half decent. It's basically, if you imagine a cross between The Breakfast Club and Chronicle, if anyone's seen Chronicle, the kind of found footage superhero movie. But if you cross those two together, mash them up, you get something similar to the Power Rangers, obviously with the Power Rangers aspects mixed in from the original TV series. But it wasn't as bad as I was expecting it to be. I quite enjoyed it, and I thought the effects were pretty good. It's a really good Ultra HD Blu-ray as well, with Dolby Vision, in fact. And also we got this week American Gods Season 1 available on Blu-ray. And I've seen that on Amazon, and I really enjoyed it. It's written by Neil Gaiman. The show's run by the guy that did Brian Fuller, who did Hannibal, among many other things, Pushing Daisies. And it's got a fantastic cast, including Ian McShane, and very, very weird, but very entertaining. And I really enjoyed it. So worth checking out if you haven't watched it on Amazon already.
Is it 4K on Amazon?
It is 4K. But not HDR.
Oh.
You got that to look forward to then, Mark.
Yeah.
On your B7. Is it worth doing Blu-rays of the month? Have we seen any Blu-rays? I haven't.
I have seen two, both of which I thought were excellent and worth mentioning. One is Elle, which is the new film from Paul Verhoeven. Which anything about Verhoeven is always good news. This is a great film by him. Very tough movie. It's basically a rape revenge drama with Isabelle Huppert playing the lead. But Verhoeven always makes interesting and challenging films. Even his duff movies are good in a way, or funny at least. But this is a good film. This is one of his better movies, and worth checking out. And the other film I've seen, I saw it this week. Week recording the podcast came out on the previous Monday, and that's Get Out, which I thought was fantastic. Really, really good. It's kind of a horror film, but it's got various racial overtones and aspects to it, and I thought it was very clever, very exciting. People behaved sensibly, didn't do stupid things in it, which always annoys me in horror films. People do stupid things, people did sensible things, what I would have done in the situation. And I thought it was excellent and definitely worth checking out.
If you've seen 2 Blu-rays this month, technically you can do a best and worst of the month then.
Yes, but that would be a bit harsh though, wouldn't it, on the two films, as I like them both.
Okay, so UHD Blu-ray news.
Well, the big news is they've announced Close Encounters of the Third Kind for the 19th of September. Also, I believe Wonder Woman's going to come out on the 19th of September as well. So September's looking like a good month rather, because we've got first of all we've got Blade Runner coming out in early September. Then we've got E.T., and the week after E.T. we've got Close Encounters and Wonder Woman. So some big titles hitting in September and going on into October as well. So it looks like we're starting to pick up pace in terms of not just new films or crap catalogue titles, but actually decent catalogue titles you might actually want to own. But I'd be really pleased. I mean, obviously, Close Encounters was a brand new 4K restoration of the original camera negative, so I'm hoping that's going to look really good.
Yeah, I might even go and buy some discs. That's
every week.
I don't say that every week, because I think a lot of the stuff that's been released on UHD so far has been rubbish. You're silly enough to go and buy it. We just sit and laugh at you. But you're getting into titles now like Close Encounters and E.T. and so on, which childhood films of mine. Of course I'm going to go and buy them. I'm going to go and buy T2 as well. I'm considering going to the cinema to see it as well, where it gets a limited release on August. I think it's the 29th of August in cinemas in 3D T2. So I'm even considering that. So
I'm not sure what happened in this country, but Close Encounters is getting a cinema release in America as well, so it might get one here.
All right,
release, which would be interesting.
I'll keep an eye on the Odeon site for that then, because I'm going to book in for T2 definitely. I'm going to go and see that. UHD Blu-rays of the month. I've only seen one, and that's Trainspotting 2. So by default, that's my Ultra HD Blu-ray of the month. But actually, it is a really good disc, and it's friggin' loud.
It is really loud, isn't it? I had to turn down a little bit.
Just a bit
too loud. My disc would be Kong Skull Island. It's not a great film, but it's fun, and it does look and sound fantastic on Ultra HD Blu-ray.
Yeah, I'm going to pick that up as well when I can. Right, so that's the UHD Blu-rays out of the way. TV shows of the month, Steve.
Well, obvious for me because it's just started again, 2 episodes in, but it's season 7 of Game of Thrones. We're getting towards the end game now, no pun intended, and things are starting to pick up speed. And this is a shorter season, it's only 7 episodes, and all the pieces are starting to align in terms of where people are, and it's getting good. So Game of Thrones for me.
Okay, I haven't seen anything this month.
You're a lot of use then.
Sorry, I mean I watch Homes Under the Hammer. Yeah, it's its usual. I love the job of music supervisor on that show because some of the tracks that they come up with in that program, it's comedy gold. If you don't watch it during the day, switch it on and just watch it just for what the music supervisor has picked to go along with what they're saying on screen. It is so abstract at times, it's hilarious.
You get a lot of that with daytime TV, though.
Yeah,
I've seen. That's not the one that Dion Dublin.
Yeah, that's the one.
Oh, that's absolutely bizarre. Some of that music.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah,
Dion Dublin, footballer.
Yeah. He's now in the property show. It's brilliant. It's so bad. It's brilliant because a lot of the time they're talking, and you know what it's like, Steve, when you make videos that. If you're writing a voiceover, your voiceover has to match what's on screen. And if you haven't got anything to put on screen, then you have to come up with something that you're going to put to illustrate what you're saying or just to pass the time so people listen to what you're saying and they can look at something. Well, in a property show where first of all, the property hasn't been done up yet, hasn't been transformed, and then it does get transformed later in the program. So you have to watch to see what these idiots that buy them at auction for way over price and then have a £2,000 or £3,000 budget when they're going to need 40. It's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. And the shots that they use to cover the voiceover are people walking into a room, stopping, looking around, and then walking out again. and it's every episode has these shots, and then they'll use a wide-angle lens at one side of the room and the other side of the room, and then they'll fade it over to what it looks like now. And how these people make any money, it's unbelievable.
It's the kind of show you imagine that maybe like Alan Partridge would do the voiceover for in the twilight of his career.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's just comedy value, and I'm sure students have drinking games. I mean, every time somebody walks in a room and looks around, Christ, you'd be paralytically drunk by the end of it if you played a drinking game on that. So anyway, that's my TV show.
Keeping it highbrow.
Well, I haven't seen anything else yet, so yeah, give me a break.
For me, I'm watching season 3 of Fargo. It's just coming towards the end of it.
Yeah, that's good. I'm enjoying that.
And I've got to say, each season is different. To me, this is very much, as someone who hasn't really got into like Game of Thrones or things that kind of last a long time, I kind of got annoyed with the whole studio system and I think we'll get on to maybe things getting cancelled. I don't know if we've got time, but I love the fact that it's a self-contained story. I like the fact that I know that it's coming to an end. I like the fact that you've got this clear arc. You know where you are in the season, and that you're going to have some kind of a resolution to it all, rather than that horrible moment where you think it's going to be a one season show, and then all of a sudden halfway through you get the news that the ratings are good and it's rolling over into a second season, and that's just the moment where I just I tune out of a show completely. So it's they've kept the same bizarre mix of things with Fargo. They've kept the kind of the oddball cop from kind of Podunkville, America, and they've kept murders and stuff like that, but each season is different. And as I say, I just love the fact that it's self-contained.
Yeah.
So let's move on to things that have been cancelled, because Netflix, they're now turning into a proper TV channel, because they're now, having been the saviours of certain TV programs and so on, where they've breathed new life into them and invested in them. They are now having to axe certain things, Steve, and it's getting to the stage now where kind of wonder, because they don't release their viewing figures, you never actually know how popular something is, really, and it's usually word of mouth. Number of people watching something that you don't get to see the viewing figures from Netflix. They keep that information very close to their chest. But it's interesting that they are wielding the axe now and cancelling things, because that tells you that there's certain things that just get no viewers whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, and not even small things too. These are big name, big budget productions of theirs. So they've recently cancelled The Get Down, which was Baz Luhrmann's hip hop series.
I want you to watch that as well. I've been saving that.
Well, it'll still be there to watch, I suppose.
But it'll be annoying if it's halfway through a season and they've cancelled it. It'd be nice to tie things up. Hopefully that's not the case.
I think they give them a chance to. I think they give him a chance to tie up some loose ends.
Okay.
And also Sense8, which is another big budget production, this time with the Wachowski sisters. And again, that's I think they're tying that one up too, but it's after 2 seasons it's been cancelled. I think the problem is that there's just literally too much television for anyone to physically watch anymore, and a lot of it's good. So we're suffering. I mean, they're a victim. Maybe to a certain extent, Netflix are a victim of their own success because they produce so many good shows that people do want to watch, like House of Cards, like Stranger Things. That you're struggling to find time to watch everything. And I have actually started. I haven't watched The Get Down, although I meant to. I still haven't got around to watching the latest season of House of Cards. Haven't seen the last season of Marco Polo. I've seen season 1, but I haven't got around to seeing season 2 of Sense8 yet. There's just too much.
I haven't watched any of those because I haven't
been busy watching Homes Under the Hammer.
Yeah, no, it's just like you say. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head when you say time. You know, it's having the time to actually sit down and watch all these and invest in something. So when you're going to invest the time in something, I think you have to be sure that you're going to give it all, and it's going to reward you for that. And I think when you've got too many things to try and get round to watching, that some things are going to fall by the wayside, and they're not going to get the viewing figures, like you say, that they possibly could get, because there's just so much out there, and it is probably a case of oversaturation at the minute. I mean, I still haven't started Game of Thrones, but I will at some point. I will invest the time in it, because the general feedback from people I know is that it's worthwhile doing. So I've got them on Blu-ray up to season 6. I shall at one point sit. That's one long weekend, mind.
Well, when it's all over, I'll finally start watching it, so you and me can compare where we are when we're up to about season 2 and everyone else is bored of it.
Yeah. So the podcast will be us discussing Games of Thrones years after everybody else has seen it.
We'll see an episode from 2012, and this will be the latest AVForums news.
Yeah. Is it still as graphic these days, Steve?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. But the thing about Game of Thrones, and this is something that Mark touched on, I think, which is something that has bugged me a lot with TV series, and that is particularly with American TV series, where they'll start off and the first season's good, and you think, oh, this is great. And then they drag it out, long past its sell-by date, and they have no idea how they're going to end. Lost is obviously the classic example where they were making it up as they went along. Each season, they had no idea where it was going. There was no end.
I think I gave up after season 3, and I think I tried to dip in at season 4 or 5, and it was some kind of bizarre time travel thing, and I just thought, oh, to hell with this.
Yeah, I mean, there are either shows that are good that get cancelled early, so like Firefly, or things that go on for too long and become crap. That tends to be quite often what happens with successful TV shows. So they go on for too long and end up being crap because, the thing that made it good doesn't, for 3 or 4 seasons, maybe you can keep it going. But once you get to season 8, season 9, it's just like, it's gone. X-Files is a good example where it peaked about season 4 or 5, and then after that was rubbish. So what's always good is when they take something like American Gods, which is based on a book. There is a set story you're following, or Game of Thrones, where we're talking about an end game. There's going to be a finite ending point to the story. It's got a beginning, middle, and end across the whole season, the whole series. Or things like Little Big Lie or Big Little Lies, I think it's called. That was a one-off on HBO. It was based on a book, so we're going to get people asking for another. Are there going to be a season 2? And they say no, there won't be a season 2 because there was one story and we've told it. I mean, you could do a Fargo where you have a different story every season, or you could do an American Horror Story where you have a different story using the same cast but in different roles each season, which keeps it fresh and interesting.
They tried that
True
with
Detective.
True Detective,
so well.
I mean, season 1 of True Detective. Oh, I mean, episode 1 had me hooked straight away. Yeah. Season 2, utter drivel.
Rubbish. Yeah. So it doesn't always work, but I think that's definitely an approach where you can keep a series fresh. to either have a definite beginning, middle, and end, or change it up each season. But the ones that go on and on and on or get cancelled when they're halfway through, and you find what happens in the end of it, that is really annoying.
I think this is one of the reasons. I mean, maybe viewing figures for Sense8 weren't as good as they might have hoped, simply because it seems particularly prevalent with sci-fi series that there's really a sense that when you've got a show where kind of it seems quite literally anything can happen, you get into that lost syndrome, or people kind of get a horrible feeling that it will go down that route of just make it up. I mean, I think, Heroes was very big for a while, and then, people just tuned out of it because there's that feeling that they can just, like with Lost, oh, we found a new hatch. Oh, it's about time travel now. And it's, when people get that sense that there isn't a coherent structure and some kind of a finite idea of what's going to happen in the end, you always get a showrunner saying, no, we actually know what it is. And they kind of trot out the old George Lucas, I wrote it many years ago line. Yeah. But ultimately, you can always get that horrible feeling of if the ratings are good, they'll find a way to just string it out. And in sci-fi, that's so much easier.
Yeah, and for me, I'm really hoping that Stranger Things 2 lives up to the hype, because the trailer, I don't know if you've seen the Comic-Con trailer, if you want any spoilers or anything like that, but that trailer for me was astonishingly good. And
using Thriller as the soundtrack.
And Thriller, yeah, and it's set in 1984 and so on. And then straight after that trailer, I saw the trailer for the new Spielberg movie, Ready Player One.
Ready Player, yeah.
And then it struck me how nostalgic things are getting these days, and everything, the symbolism in that movie and the stuff from the 80s, and there's a flying DeLorean in there, for goodness sake. Is it getting to the point now where I'm worrying, because are we overdoing it on the nostalgia trip stuff, like this Ready Player One and Stranger Things? There's a danger there that you're playing to a certain audience, and like you say, Mark, they might tune out eventually if it doesn't quite hold it. And Stranger Things has got a lot to live up to.
It does. Although I don't have a problem with nostalgia if it's done well. The thing about Stranger Things is, yes, it was steeped in nostalgia, and it was obviously a love letter to the films that we grew up on in the early 80s, things like Spielberg, Joe Dante, whatever. But it was done well. It was an interesting story. It had a great cast. It was exciting and fun, and the kids were brilliant. And it worked. So if they can capture lightning in the bottle a second time around, it will be great. Because obviously it's never easy, is it, to follow up something that's been so popular and successful.
Yeah.
But certainly the trailer so far, it looks like it's got some interesting stuff in there. And I'm up for it. The thing about shows when they go shit, basically, is it does at least allow you to play the game of jump the shark, doesn't it? So at what point does the show become crap? What was that one moment where it tipped over and you knew it was going to be rubbish from then on? And you can pick so many shows where you can start looking at it and thinking. I remember with Lost, I saw into about season 3. There was a bit where there were two characters. One of them was Michelle Rodriguez. I think they'd been busted offset for drunk driving in Hawaii, so they had to be sacked. So they just shot them. And you knew at that point it was like, okay, you're just making this shit up. They should just kill because you got rid of the two actresses. You're going to kill the characters, but you've been building up their plot lines massively for the last season, and suddenly it's just gone. That just shows that really this is all cobblers, and you don't have any grand plan at all.
Yeah,
I think the beauty is though with Stranger Things, at least when it's a show set around child actors, they will. They're not going to allow them to get to that stage where one of them's voice breaks, or something like that. They've got to stop it before they become slightly weird-looking teenagers.
Yeah. I think the big tester for me this year, I think it's launched on 25th of, is it August or September? September. 25th of September is the new Star Trek Discovery. The first trailer, I wasn't impressed. Latest trailer I've seen, I'm starting to think, okay, you've got my interest now. I'll give you. I was always going to watch it, but I'll give you a chance. But it's going to be interesting to see. We won't see what the viewing figures are because again, it's Netflix and they don't release it. But it'll be interesting to see just how it sets the internet alight and what the feedback is on it, because I think it's make or break for the franchise, to be honest.
Yeah, because the last film didn't do gangbusters, did it? So,
no.
I mean, I know they're doing another film, but this has got a lot to carry, really, because it's got some interesting showrunners. It's set 20 years before Kirk. I mean, I know it's set before the films, I assume. So the technology is more impressive.
You're assuming that it's the reboot.
The Klingons look completely different. So God knows what's going on, really. But yeah, it looked a lot better in the second trailer. They've clearly upped the budget for effects. Certainly, I'll definitely watch it. It's got my interest. It takes place in an interesting period in the history of the Federation too, with that sort of when they were first encountering the Klingons, and so I'm sure. As long as it's got good writers who can come up with interesting stories each week.
Yeah. And interesting again, not just one strong female lead, but two in this.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see how that pans out as well. You interested, Mark?
Yeah. I mean, I just on the point about the kind of female leads, it's weird because recently I've been watching a little bit of Star Trek Voyager on TV. It's just popped up. And what's really, really striking is just how good Janeway is.
Yeah.
And just you think kind of we had the conversation about the female Doctor Who last week, I think it was. But Janeway really was the kind of gold standard for that kind of strong female lead, and that was years ago. She still seems kind of better than what we've got now. It just seems strange that it's just. How did we not progress from that? I don't quite get it.
That's what I couldn't believe the arguments when it came to the Doctor Who, because they were saying, sci-fi and all the rest, they don't have strong females. And you're thinking, bollocks, that was over 20 odd years ago that Janeway was strutting her stuff. And it was good. And it was really good for the time period. And it was interesting. And she was a strong character that you liked. So I really couldn't understand the backlash to Doctor Who, to be honest.
No, I mean, you go back to the X-Files with Scully. We've had that character before. We've had, the kind of strong female lead who's kind of not kind of romantically entwined in some way. She's not just a love interest. She's playing just the role as a character, and as a female character secondary to that. But yeah, it just seems kind of strange that was so long ago. So, if they can capture some of that in this new series, then yeah, I'll definitely be interested.
Okay, well, on that bombshell, that's it for the AVForums podcast this week. Just before we go, just to remind you, because of holidays, because people are going away and breaking their legs and all sorts of other things, and myself and Steve are actually in London for the Philips event. There is no podcast next week. So we'll be back again on the 14th of August for the next podcast. So we're taking a week off. And like I say, that's for various holidays. I mean, Mark Hodge is away on holiday, and Ed hopefully will get away and have some kind of holiday. And hopefully,
I look forward to the pictures of him on the beach with his cast on.
Well, the leading image for this podcast was sent through an email this morning, which is his cast, so so people can see exactly what Ed has on his leg.
You should use some Photoshop and put knob or something on the cast.
Or actually, it'd be worth the trip down to Milton Keynes just to do that, to be honest.
Just wait till he's asleep. Wait till he's asleep and write vinyl his shit on his leg.
Yeah, that'd be worth the petrol money to go down and do that. It really would. Anyway, that's it for this week. My thanks to Steve Others.
I only speak two languages, English and bad English.
And it's like this podcast. And Mark Botwright.
Chicken good.
And don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and videos. And of course, leave us those 5-star ratings on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for listening. And we'll see you again on the 14th of August.